Ryan Bolton here. I am a mortgage nerd with Patriot Home Mortgage in St. George, Utah. I've been doing home loans since 1999, and I've really seen and done it all. And recently, I keep seeing these New York Times articles that are talking about renting being better than buying. They have this new calculator on their website they've been pushing, but a lot of the articles aren't pushing the home ownership side, they're pushing the renting side. This recent article I wanted to dive into a little bit and just see what you think about these numbers and see if I can prove to you that owning a home in the long run is better than renting. Now, obviously, I'm biased because I do mortgage loans, but I've done a lot with real estate, my own properties, rental properties, fix and flips. I've done a lot within the real estate world, and homeowners win in the long run. So I want to prove it to you. So this recent article is entitled Renting Forever and Trying to Create a Strong Financial Future. If you scroll a little bit further down in the article, it talks about this. It says renting can be a better financial decision. He even quotes a little lower than that. It says, too often we simply buy because our parents told us to, and their parents told them to. Okay, there may be that where people just think it's better to buy a home, but there's security with buying a home. It's part of the American dream to own your own home. There's financial security, there's investments, there's more than just financial reasons to buy a home. But just because your parents told you to do it doesn't mean they're wrong. And their parents, there's something about buying a home that's a generational thing as well. It's also kind of a great stepping stone. It's kind of graduating high school, maybe graduating college, getting married, buying a house. These are kind of some pivotal moments, some milestones in our life. And there's just so many wonderful incentives and wonderful reasons to own a home on top of the financial ones that we're going to get to in this slide. Further down the list, this is kind of the argument this particular article is making. It says over the last century, the S&P 500 has returned an average of about 7% a year when adjusted for inflation. Then down a little further, I thought this is a little interesting way to close this out. It says, remember, there are literally millions of people in America who rent and invest the difference. You're not some weirdo just because you're choosing to rent. I do, and plenty of other people do it. Okay, there's a time and place to rent, but I don't know millions of people that are really investing the difference. I don't see a lot of people say, well, my rent payment is $1,500, but I'm going to pay $2,000 and take the other $500 and invest it. Now they may be investing for other reasons, but I don't know if they've ever conceptualized it that, hey, I'm really paying more to my rent, but splitting it between investments and rental. So maybe that's a good idea. If you're out there renting right now and you want to get ready to buy a home, may not be a bad idea to round up your payment and invest that difference. Not only are you used to paying that higher payment, but you actually will have something going into investments instead of just paying for rent and have really nothing to show for it. But let's dive into these numbers. I'm a big believer in real estate. I'm a big believer that homeowners win in the long run. So let's look at a couple numbers here and see if I can convince you that if you can buy, buy. The sooner you start buying, the sooner you'll be a homeowner, and the sooner you'll be able to take advantage of some of the financial benefits of owning a home. So let's see if I can convince you. All right, let's take a look at some of the numbers that will determine the math and kind of play this out. And I also want to give you the methodology behind where these numbers are coming from. So let's take a sales price of $500,000, putting 10% down with a 7% mortgage rate. That'll be a payment of $4,354, and that includes taxes and insurance, kind of the total payment on that home. Now, every area is going to be different with taxes and insurance. I mean, I'm just trying to use some general numbers. The rate may be different than 7%, but again, I'm just trying to kind of compare what that home would typically cost in today's market. If you look at that same home, kind of similar square footage, your rental is going to be about $3,600 a month. Now, there may be times where it'll be a little less, maybe a little bit more. It's all area dependent. I've had some people that say, well, that's going to be, I'd love to have a $3,600 rental, but at the same time, there may be places where it's only $2,500, but it wouldn't be a $500,000 value. So I'm trying to do as close to an apples to apples comparison. If you buy a $500,000 home with that interest rate versus what that same home would rent for in most markets. So right off the bat, you can see it's $703 a month cheaper to rent that same home than to own it. So this article is making the argument that if you take that $703 invested in the stock market, getting an average of a 7% rate of return, adjusted for inflation over a same time frame, you'll be further ahead. But there's a couple of numbers I want you to be aware of that can kind of skew that number and where you want to make sure you know where these numbers come from. First of all, rentals don't go down. The price of rent does not go down. I went all the way back to 1980 and took an average, and it's about 5% per year that rent increases. Now, we've seen that jump a lot over the last couple of years. But if you look at that snapshot all the way back to 1980, it's about 5% per year. Now, you may see where year 1 and 2, it doesn't change, but then year 3, it jumps up more. So it is an average kind of a year over year adjustment at 5%. But also the house payment. If you have a 30-year fix, the payment won't change, but taxes and insurance will go up. Most of the reports I saw were under 2%, so I just kind of rounded it up to 2% of what taxes and insurance can increase. There's some areas it doesn't increase at all. It's like fixed in, it's locked in taxes, but other areas are prorated, and like some areas are more expensive on property taxes. But I think a 2% increase in property taxes and insurance is a fair number over a 9-year average. The other things you have to factor in is repairs on a home. Now, I think this is a big reason that people think they don't want to own a home is repair costs. So I use 2,500. I think that's on the high side. I've rented properties, I have rentals, I have my own properties, and I don't think I'm spending that much per year. But what you'll see is you'll have nothing, 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 and then kind of a bigger expense. So it is something where I'm trying to spread that out over a 9-year snapshot. Now, if you do have that kind of thought in your mind, I don't want to have to worry about all these repairs. I often ask those people, how long have you been renting your current home? And they'll say 2 or 3 years. And I'll tell them how many things have broken. Like, really think about how many things have broken that your landlord had to come and fix over the last couple of years. Now, for some of you, it might be a ton of stuff, but I'd say most people aren't that much. I remember one guy was renting for 5 years. His garbage disposal and I think the garage door opener are the only two things he had an issue with in 5 years. So these things don't break that much. And we're not talking about like upgrades or stuff like that when it comes to recarpeting or repainting. I mean, those are more of the cosmetic things. I'm talking about actual repairs on the home. So I think 2,500 is a safe number. If anything, it's a little on the high side. The next one we're going to talk about is the cost to sell the home. In most markets, you're going to be anywhere between 5 to 6% for commissions and title fees and stuff like that. So I use 6% again to be kind of more industry normal, or even on the worst case side a little bit on what you're going to experience when you go to sell the property. Next thing I want to talk about appreciation. I'm not going to try to use some crazy number, 5, 6, 7, 8%, 10% rate of return, nothing like that. If you look at the 63-year average of home appreciation, this is factoring '08, this is factoring all kinds of different ups and downs. This is factoring 63 years worth of home appreciation. It's averaged about 4.2%. So I even looked at what the projections are over the next 9 years, and most of them were coming in right about an average of 4.13%. So I'm going to use that number as what the home will appreciate to just kind of see how these numbers actually play out when you consider rent increase, property tax increase, repairs, selling costs, and the increase in the property's value. So I'm trying this, comment below if you think these numbers are way off or where you think they should be adjusted. But I think these numbers are going to play out as a good median, a good average, what you're going to see in most states. Again, there's going to be states that are going to be way different on property taxes, but I think this gives you a good snapshot of what we're dealing with. And again, the article is making the case that you can get a better rate of return by just investing this $703 cheaper. But I want to show you how that actually plays out when you factor in the other adjustments to those payments over a 9-year average. So let's take a look in the next slide. So here we're going to break down those numbers into a monthly amount to kind of compare them side by side as time increases up to that 9-year mark. So year one's definitely the biggest year where you're losing that $703 a month, but you can see how quickly it starts to switch because the mortgage payment is way more consistent than rental increases. So you can see by year 5, you're basically almost ahead when it comes to rental. And then by year 9, you're actually losing ground like crazy. So it just comes down to how quickly the rents start to go up without any additional benefit. So it's eating into that $703 that you're able to save and put in the stock market if the rents start to increase, even though the mortgage payment is way more stable. And this doesn't even count appreciation yet. So we'll talk about that on the next slide. But I want to do kind of a side-by-side comparison over that 9-year snapshot that as these numbers play out, it's amazing how quick the mortgage starts to make a lot more sense. Now, initially, yes, it's more expensive, but it will catch up. And this as quick as year 5 versus renting during that same amount of time. Now, during that 5 years, you're investing that $703. So let's take a look at the next slide on how the appreciation with that increase in rental costs will actually be worse for the renter than it will be for the homeowner. So let's take a look at this. If you do the amortization, there's a couple things I want to throw into there of what you're actually going to see in some of the other numbers people don't really look at. First of all, you're going to have the appreciation. If we use that 4.13%, which is lower than the 63-year average like we talked about, but on the projections over the next 9 years, that's going to be an appreciation factor of about $219,000. Plus, you're going to add the cash flow difference between the year 1 and year 9, where you were losing ground for the first year or two and then gained it all back on the next couple of years as rents went up while the mortgage payment was more stable. Then you throw in the tax benefits of a 22% tax bracket with the mortgage interest. That's going to give you another $20,000 to write off on the property or in the income taxes. Next, you're going to have the appreciation gain, where it's the difference between some of your payment going to principal versus none of your payment going to anywhere when you're renting a house, that's another $55,000 you paid down the loan with as well. Plus, you're going to have the closing costs when you first bought the loan. Then you're going to have the closing costs when you go to sell it, the 6% that we factored in off the higher sales price at $43,182. So you can see the net gain by the time you get to year 9 is $248,118. So you throw that in, you can see the first year you're down $21,000. The first year you're losing ground. Year 2, you're almost breaking even. By the time you get to year 3, 4, 5, you're really accelerating, getting way ahead of the ball game. By the time you get to year 9, you're almost $250,000 ahead when you factor in all the other expenditures and pluses and minuses that are factored into that. So now let's compare that. If you took the same amount of money and instead of putting it towards this mortgage over that time frame, you were investing it in the stock market, getting an average return of 7%. But you also have to factor you're not having 703 to work with every single month because you're going to have that rent cost go up. So let's take a look at a chart there of what you'll have after 9 years if you invest the money instead of having the mortgage. So now let's take the $703 that you're saving from the difference of the rent versus the mortgage. And let's say you do invest it at getting a 7% rate of return, but also factoring the 703 will start to go down because the rent is starting to go up. So that way we can do a true side-by-side comparison and see after 9 years who was really ahead, the renter or the homeowner. So you can see year 1, you're doing pretty good. Year 2, you're even adding to that. It's gaining interest every single year on the initial amount, but you can see it starts to flip after about year 5 because the rents have gone up more. So you can't keep contributing that $703 a month without adding more to your overall budget, where you wouldn't have to do as much with the mortgage because the payment is more consistent. So you can see after 9 years, it actually starts to become a negative amount that you can contribute. So then the gains aren't as much as you would have gained if you were putting the same amount of money towards the mortgage payment. And you can see the math here. I mean, pick it apart. Let me know what I've done wrong here. But you can see the total grand benefit of renting with the 7% rate of return, with the 703 that goes down as rent goes up, is $52,934. If you look at what you're gaining from buying a home, you're at $248,000. So you're $195,000 ahead by owning a home than you would be by renting the home, even with investing the difference. So I think that you have to factor in that the 703 isn't going to be very consistent, because if you're keeping the same payment and kind of comparing apples to apples, your rent is going to go up quicker and eat into your savings. So homeowners win in the long run. I mean, let me know what I've done wrong. I love your comments. If you're a real estate agent or somebody else in the mortgage industry, send this video out to people that are saying that, hey, I've decided to wait. I'm going to wait for home prices to come down. I'm going to wait for interest rates to come down. Don't wait. There's a saying in the industry that I really like: marry the house, date the rate. Rates are going to go up and down. They're going to change. They're going to do other things like that. I think most people have a consensus that rates are probably at the higher end of where they're going to be, and there should be some pressure to move rates down over the next few years. But even then, even at 7%, these numbers play out wonderfully. And it's something where it's almost a forced savings account where you're having to pay into this, but gaining appreciation, gaining the tax benefits. Now, maybe you need a cheaper house. Maybe 500,000 just too much. Interest rates are more and you don't have that much buying power. But start somewhere. Get into home ownership. It is a better play than renting, even if you do truly invest the difference. So I hope you like this video. Please like and share, comment. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong. I'm open to the conversation with this, but I think there's been a lot more news, a lot more pushback that people should just stay with renting. And I think there is a time and a place, but if you can buy, buy. Even if it's got to be cheaper, even if you got to settle in a different area, you just have to kind of make it work to begin with. You're going to be better off in the long run. You really will be. I've even seen people that have to co-sign more often with family members or friends to get into that first home, to kind of get into it, because there's more benefits on the long run. So get into home ownership. The sooner you get into it, the better you'll be able to take advantage of these benefits. If you're looking for a loan in Utah, Nevada, that's where I'm licensed. My company, Patriot Home Mortgage, they're licensed in other states. So if you need help in other states, I can direct you to the right person. But I'd love to earn your business. I'd love to get you into home ownership. We do free pre-approvals. Check out my website at ryanbolton.com, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks, everyone.